Today I will be sharing with you my favorite Gish class combinations, in other words, my favorite Spellsword-like characters that use both melee and magic to demolish their foes. I made this guide in preparation for Baldur's Gate 3, I think all of those builds will be viable when Baldur's Gate 3 comes out. Of course there will still probably some changes, we still don't know all the details on multi-classing, will the spellcasting classes mix together when you put two classes together, because there are some rumors about that, but even if something like that were to happen and multi-classing will be even stronger, well, it will make those builds even stronger that I'm presenting today, so it won't really change much, except that, well, the builds will just be even more powerful. So first things first, remember that in Baldur's Gate 3, the class restrictions for multi-classing were actually removed, so you won't need to have the actual scores required to multi-class into something else. For example, if you want to turn your fighter into a wizard, you won't need 13 intellect anymore, and so on and so on. The first thing we should be looking at when creating our powerful Gish-like character is synergies between the classes. You can make a good single-class Spellsword-like character, but most likely you will probably be multi-classing sooner or later to pick up those powerful mixed synergy abilities that different classes offer. That doesn't mean that you have to mix and match a bunch of classes to make some crazy hybrid character with 3 different or 5 different classes. Sometimes it's as simple as picking a level or 2 called a dip in another class in order to pick up those powerful baseline abilities that some classes have. For example, Paladin for his heavy armor proficiencies, his saving throws, and some other useful goodies. When creating your Spellsword character, it's also important to look at the races. For example, Githyanki right away get the Greatsword proficiency and medium armor proficiency, which can be very handy when creating a Gish. Similarly, you can look at the Zerial Tiefling that will get later on such spells as Branding Smite on level 3, which lets you add some damage to your attack rolls, and as a spellcasting / melee character, it's very handy to have. All Spellblade-like characters, especially ones without Constitution saving throw proficiency, will benefit greatly from the Warcaster feat, which you can grab on level 4 as any class, so keep that in mind while building your Gish, as it will allow you to hold your concentration, which is very important for melee casters, especially if we get the Green Flame Blade cantrip in the full game. Remember that you also want to look for a mix of classes that utilize the same main attribute. This is something very important to keep in mind, to just not be mad, which means you would have to focus on too many main ability scores and you would just spread your stats around very thin. So you want to focus on the classes that utilize 2, maximum of 3 stats together, so you just won't end up with a character that is just everywhere and is not good at anything. So for example, if you mix a cleric with a druid, you want to focus on wisdom. If you focus on the paladin with a warlock, you want to focus on charisma, and so on and so on. Now with the basics out of the way, let us get into the actual class combinations. The first one I got for you is a hybrid between a paladin and a bard class. You can go 2 different ways with this combination. First one is by starting as a bard and taking 6 levels in the class, and you're gonna focus on the College of Swords or perhaps Valor if you prefer it, because it's gonna give you the extra attack feature. And you will also get access to level 3 spells as a bard. Remember that bards in 5th edition D&D are actually full level casters, which means you gain a lot more spells, and you also are able to cast up to level 6 spells if you're gonna go a pure Swords College bard if you want to, but you can also postpone it a little bit and get a level of paladin in the mix along the way, so you're gonna get those powerful paladin's abilities. But remember that you actually won't get heavy armor proficiency if you're gonna multi-class after picking a bard. So if you want to rely on strength and go the heavy armor route, you should pick the paladin first and then the bard. For example, 2 levels of paladin will give you access to smites. Smites are very powerful abilities that you're gonna add your damage to your attacks, so you can go this way, but you can also start out as a bard, get the 6 levels of bard first to get this extra attack and also have more spells, and then dip into 2 levels of paladin to pick up your smites and be able to be even more successful in melee. So with this build, you actually end up most likely as 10 levels of the bard with the 2 levels of the paladin for smites, and that just makes you a very powerful class overall, because you're gonna get access to a lot of powerful bardic abilities and also up to level 5 spells. So this is just something really good if you want to focus more on the spellcasting aspect while still being very good with your flourishes and everything else in melee. And once again, the powerful smites, I can't stress them enough, because, well, they are just really powerful to mix with a Gish. And also, of course, you're gonna focus on your charisma in this character, but also dexterity if you decide to forego that heavy armor proficiency and be more of an agile agile type of a Gish, then you can opt for the dueling style from the Bard and also pick from the Paladin the defense style, so you're gonna have more armor class along with more damage from dueling that you're gonna pick up as a Bard. You can, however, just as well decide to go the strength route with the charisma and just focus more on being a Paladin first and then transition into the Bard. Now a bit more defensive but still as powerful, if not more, version of the Paladin mixed with the Sorcerer called usually the Sorcadin. The Sorcadin will have even more spells available to him thanks to the Sorcerer's bonus sorcery points feature, which you can convert your spell slots into even more smite uses. You can also use meta magic feats like Quicken Spell to use Haste or Fireball as a bonus action. You can start this build with 5 levels of Paladin to get the extra attack feature and then transition into the Sorcerer, or alternatively you can go to level 7 of Paladin for one of the amazing auras the Oath provide, namely the Oath of Devotion being quite amazing. Or if you want to be a Gish faster, you can stick to the Paladin 5 or even Paladin 2 if you really want, and then go all the way as a Sorcerer. It's also very worth to consider taking the Draconic Ancestry White if you decide to go for the Draconic Bloodline, because it will give you access to the spell from the Warlock spell list called Armor of Agathis, which gives you bonus hit points and you will deal 5 cold damage back to the attacker, and it also scales with level, so it will be actually even more powerful as you level up. This version of our Spellsword will also make for a great frontliner and a great tank, because we're gonna be able to also get the shield spell in the full release of the game, which is just another tool that we can add to the already existing ones that we have that will make us even more resilient in combat. This build would also benefit greatly from the Green Flame Blade spell, but we don't have it confirmed in game yet, but I do hope it's gonna come, because this will make this build even more powerful on the offensive aspect. Okay, I know we are going a little crazy with the Paladin Gish builds, but they are simply very strong, and I can't omit another powerful variant, especially with the latest reveal of Warlocks getting the Pact of the Blade with lots of features from the Hexblade, namely Firsting Blade invocation, which will let us make another attack, and also of course using our charisma to add damage to attack and hit rolls. We will most likely want to start out with 2 levels as a Paladin to get smites and heavy armor proficiency, and then transition to take 3 levels of Warlock for the Pact of the Blade. That will however delay our extra attack quite a bit unless we continue as Warlock for the Firsting Blade on level 5. Alternatively, we could go 5 levels into Paladin and then grab 3 levels of Warlock, but that will mean we will most likely want to start out as a strength based Paladin and then respec our stats to mainly focus on charisma once we grab those aspect of the blade features. Or if you don't want to use the respec feature, you might start out with a dexterity charisma based Paladin and then grab the Warlock levels. This is another build where we would benefit greatly from the Green Flame Blade, but we are not sure if it will make it into the full game as a spell. You lose out on the shield spell with this build unless you dip 1 level into the Sorcerer class, which honestly wouldn't be too bad, especially with the White Draconic Bloodline giving us Armor of Agathis. It is also very important to note that you have to start out as a Paladin in order to get heavy armor proficiency. If you do it the other way around, you actually don't get heavy armor as a proficiency if you start out as a Warlock, so it is important, especially since we're going to be taking the Pact of the Blade from the Warlock to add our charisma bonus to our attacks, so it is important to note that obviously you won't have very high strength in this case, and also possibly dexterity, but if you don't want to use the respec feature, you could just go as a dexterity Paladin and then grab the Warlock, and you will be totally fine with using charisma to your bonus attacks, and also you will just be more tanky thanks to the dexterity from the medium or even light armor. But now we got the combination that pairs very well together because of the fact that bards typically lack good damage spells, and Warlock bards can nicely fix that with their powerful Eldritch Blasts. But not only that, you can still be a great Spellsword up close thanks to the College of Swords Bard, which will give you flourishes, full level casting and some great buffs. The recently announced level 3 Pact of the Blade features really help this class out to be very fun and strong build, especially with getting 5 levels of Bard. We will get Font of Inspiration, which will let us replenish our flourishes on short rests, and also some of our spell slots thanks to the Warlock short rest feature. You usually want to grab 3 or 5 levels of Warlock first for the extra attacks from Firsting Blade and then transition into the Bard. Alternatively, you could go 6 levels of Warlock first and then grab 6 levels of College of Swords Bard to grab the medium armor and shield proficiencies. If you're gonna start out as a warlock, the subclass you want to take doesn't really matter that much because it is not tied to the Pact of the Blade that we're gonna get on level 3, but most people will take the Fiend because it has, in my opinion, a bit better benefits. And if you decide to be more on melee combat than ranged, make sure that you're gonna grab the useful warlock spells, especially Armor of Agathis. Finally, our last but not least combination is going to be the Eldritch Knight Fighter in combination with Wizard. The way we will build this character is by grabbing the Eldritch Knight subclass from the fighter on level 3 and getting it to level 6 to grab both a second attack, ability score improvement and 2 spellcasting levels, because Eldritch Knights progress their spellcasting at the rate of 1/3 of a full spellcaster, then transition into the wizard to cast more useful spells and buffs. You could also go all the way to level 8 as an Eldritch Knight, but you will be very light on your spell usage that way, but with a lot of feats and ability score improvements you could grab along with the fighter level 7 features, and then in late game grab 4 levels of wizard to round out your spellcasting abilities. It's a great build offensively because you will have a lot of martial prowess, but you also gonna have some useful level 3 spells along the way, but it will come online pretty late game because you're gonna grab the level 3 spells as a wizard pretty much towards the end of your playthrough, but it's still a very powerful combination if you want to be a bit of a spellcaster but still just have amazing fighting potential. When it comes to ability scores in this combination, you actually don't need to grab a lot of intelligence because in first act, if you don't mind spoilers or maybe you're gonna find it yourself, there is a headband of intellect which gonna raise our intellect all the way to 17, so we don't have to start out with a lot of ability scores here unless you're gonna use the couple spells that you're gonna have from the Eldritch Knight offensively instead of defensively for mainly using the shield spell, etc. Then maybe you want to raise the intelligence a bit more, but still there is an item that actually raises your intelligence to 17, so you can focus fully on strength, dexterity and constitution. Dexterity actually not that much needed unless you decide to go the dexterity route, then you just can focus on strength, constitution and a bit of wisdom for your spell saving throws. Now as a bonus, some honorable mentions for single class Gishes who are also viable if you decide on something simpler for your first playthrough. I got you. You could simply go pure warlock, grab Pact of the Blade, Thirsting Blade on level 5 for extra attack, Green Flame Blade if it will be available in the game, and go to town with being a classic spellblade, but hopefully will fit this role as the Blade of Frontiers. Second option is by going College of Swords and most likely a Zariel Tiefling Bard all the way with full spellcasting progression, powerful flourishes and probably grabbing the dueling fighting playstyle. Going Zariel Tiefling here would be ideal as you will get some nice smites as you level up to dish up additional damage occasionally. Note that you will most likely want to use lighter armor with this build and go with charisma and dexterity to rise that armor class. Another honorable mention is the monk with the 4 elements subclass, but we don't have enough information on that yet for me to make a full build for you. But from what I heard, Larian is buffing it significantly with more key points usage and stronger spells comparing to the tabletop counterpart, so fingers crossed it will also make for a strong spell flinging class along with martial arts instead of a sword. Think Avatar: The Last Airbender type of character. There is one more subclass that we forgot to mention that could be considered a bit of a Gish, namely the Circle of the Spores Druid. For your ability scores, you will want to focus on your wisdom and constitution to maximize your health and also the damage from your Shillelagh cantrip and also your spores damage. Dexterity you can keep at 14 to utilize that medium armor proficiency. You will most likely be restricted to using clubs and quarterstaff to use that Shillelagh, which will add more damage to your attacks. It's important to note that Symbiotic Entity, one of the key features of the Druid of the Spores, is scaling with levels, so it's not very good to multiclass this kind of subclass, but you could go for one level of the Cleric for the, for example, Domain of Life, which will give you even more powerful healing spells if you decide to be this support healer type of a Gish. You will still be able to do decently in melee, so don't be afraid to go into combat and swing that club, while also being able to cast some good offensive spells along the way. And that will do it. That's my list of my favorite Gish-like characters in Baldur's Gate 3. Let me know what you thought of it. I would love to see you in the comments with your ideas, because I know there are plenty other builds that we can use, and I would love to brainstorm with all of you about the possibilities in Baldur's Gate 3. Also, thank you very much for watching my video. Just seeing this community grow the last 2 weeks is crazy. I just can't thank you enough. You are making my day so much better by just being here and making me enjoy this hobby even more. So visit me also on Twitch TV Canra, where I will be streaming different games all the time, also up to the release of Baldur's Gate 3. Even today, after this video comes online, I will be live, so I hope to see you there. If you want to have a place to hang out, I will gladly welcome you there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again very soon.